The fallout from the Karen Reed trial is far bigger than I ever imagined. For the past several years, the Karen Reed trials have been top of the national news. I mean, last summer we were glued to our TVs or our cell phones, wondering what happened to Boston police officer John O'Keefe, what's going to happen to Karen Reed. Now we're asking, what happened to the entire system? Welcome to the Margaret McLean Show. I'm your host, Margaret McLean, your courtroom translator. I'm a former prosecutor and civil trial attorney, and I'm here to take you behind the scenes and explain the law. I also taught law at Boston College for a very long time. I like to teach, so I hope you learn something on my channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, press the like button, and turn those notifications on for future shows. So tonight we're going to explore the fallout from the Karen Reed, I'm going to call it saga. Hundreds of criminal cases could be reopened. What happens when concerns about one investigation begin to spread far beyond a single case? I'll be discussing breaking news tonight, just today, okay? Anthony Benedetti, the chief of the Committee for Public Counsel Services in Massachusetts, sent letters to the Massachusetts State Police, Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey, and members of the Massachusetts Bar. In those letters, he argued that newly revealed text messages involving former State Trooper Michael Proctor and former Canton Police Sgt. Goode raised serious concerns about the fairness of cases in which they were involved, and I couldn't agree with him more. The Committee for Public Counsel Services is now asking for lists of every open and closed case involving these investigators. They're advising defense attorneys to obtain these materials for clients with pending cases, appeals, and even some closed cases. And they're raising a larger question here, whether evidence of bias by investigators should have been disclosed to defendants whose lives may have been affected by their horrible work. I'm just going to say horrible because I can't even think about those texts without having my stomach turn, and we don't want to have that happen on my live show. Now, this is where I also think the conversation moves beyond the headlines and into the law. Under Massachusetts law, evidence reflecting bias or prejudice by an investigator that may be considered favorable to the defense, it needs to be disclosed. It needs to be disclosed. So Benedetti argued in those letters that there is no question that the messages, those horrible text messages, constitute mandatory discovery. He also points to a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decision that suggests prosecutors may have an obligation to investigate, identify impacted defendants, and provide notice. So that's asking quite a bit. Those are remarkable claims, in my opinion. The implications there could be enormous. I mean, think about it. Could prior convictions be challenged? Can those who were convicted possibly seek new trials? Can prosecutors be forced to review hundreds of cases? Also, could this extend beyond Michael Proctor and Goode if other officers appear in these communications? And these questions deserve careful analysis, and I believe that the vast majority of police officers serve honorably and professionally. I really do. But public trust in the justice system depends on confidence that investigations are conducted by all investigators fairly, objectively, and without bias. As a former prosecutor, I believe these questions deserve careful analysis. The vast majority of police officers, like I said, I've met so many of them, and I do believe that I can trust in their decisions, but I think that as a result of the few, such as Proctor and Goode and the others who are out there, they are making the good police officers look terrible, terrible in the eyes of the nation. So tonight, we're going to explore what these developments really mean, not just for Karen Read, but for defendants, prosecutors, law enforcement agencies, and the public's faith in the criminal justice system. And joining me is one of Massachusetts' most respected criminal defense attorneys to help us translate all this fallout. And that would be attorney Peter Elikann. He's a seasoned lawyer and he's been following this case closely. We'll discuss not only the legal claims in Karen Read's lawsuit, but also the larger questions of accountability, institutional culture, public trust, and whether bias can affect the way investigations are conducted. So I am happy to welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on, Peter.
Thanks for having me. Terrific to be here.
Oh, it is. I have to say that we were together almost every night on court TV following the Karen Read trial last year. Was it still going on at this time last year, Peter?
Oh, I can't believe
remember.
You stumped me in the very first question.
I did. I was thinking of that today, was because it was just a whirlwind summer with Karen Read. And you've got to remember, there were two trials, so I get one mixed up with the other, right? But I do remember the weather was nice.
Yeah, well, no, we were outside the courthouse at night doing the show, sitting out there. And
yeah.
And one thing, yeah, it does hit home what you just said about this case has been going on so long that I just realized this case started, and God, what an effect this must have on Karen Read personally. This case started 4.5 years ago. This started, and it's almost taken a life of its own. It's almost like a Karen Read way of life, that it's there's no end in sight, because even though we had a criminal case and then they had to have a do-over of the criminal case, and now we're into these all kinds of civil lawsuits in all kinds of directions, and
4 civil lawsuits.
They can go on for years. There's like no end in sight. This really is, and for Karen Read to go through all this, I just can't imagine the psychological impact of this year after year after year, and still no end in sight.
No end in sight. Yeah. So you read those letters, the CPCS letters, and I know you were on TV earlier at Fox 25 talking about those, and then, thank you for joining me after that. But when you read those letters, what struck you most?
All right, here's what struck me most, that it went beyond just, if this was just some guys who were like first-rate police officers doing everything right, and yet they had a terrible sense of humor and in poor taste, and they were making sexist and racist and ethnic jokes and all that, and to try to make each other laugh or to be obnoxious or whatever, I would say, yes, that would be a terrible thing. That would be reprehensible when people find out. It certainly would reflect badly, and really people would lose confidence in the police. But this goes beyond just wise guy, nasty, impolite, inappropriate comments. This is starting to really lead at and this was really an eye opener that we've all seen in the last few weeks. I mean, the last few days, that this really alludes to misconduct when they're saying things like, literally, and I know this has been quoted a few times, Proctor text, 4-car accident, get on it. Actually, take your time. I saw a expletive. It's an N-word for African American. I saw a black person was involved, so I wouldn't rush if you're working. Let them die. Now, when you hear that, it's beyond just joking. It's like, is there all kinds of misconduct going on here? Because again and again, it should be punch a expletive for Black Person Day in Canton today out of retribution. Any Black person you see blasted in the face. They're saying things like that, and you really wonder about the misconduct going on here. That it's beyond just saying stupid, obnoxious things, but really what are they doing that reflects what they're saying? And this was always my biggest problem with their conduct in the Karen Read case. For example, there's one example I always go back to. A body is found outside of a house on the lawn where we know a party was the night before. Proctor shows up, and he decides he won't even look in the house. He won't do an investigation. He won't talk to people who are in the party. He says, oh, it was a police officer lives there. I know him. So therefore, they just zero in on Karen Reed. And this was my problem. Not that they then used all these sexist, misogynist kind of terms, but that the actual investigation was so directed by the prejudice and the bias. And that's what I'm really concerned about, not just the words alone, but their conduct. And that is why, and I'll wrap this up in a second, but that is
that's
why
okay.
It is a real concern now. This goes beyond the Karen Reed case. This is all over the state. These guys have been involved in hundreds and hundreds of different investigations. Now, in fairness, we have to kind of open up and investigate hundreds. I can't imagine the tens of millions of dollars this is going to cost the state because of what Proctor and Goode have done. But in fairness, we got to look. Was there misconduct here? And this is more than just kind of a rumor or, gee, they just don't like certain ethnic groups. We're really seeing something that is just, this is an absolute bombshell, I think. And it all has to be opened up. And perhaps cases have to be retried or they have to be dismissed or whatever. And this is going to, wow, this is just, like I've said, tens of millions of dollars and the efforts of people everywhere. And there may be people sitting in cells today. So that is why this really is a dramatic turn of events that goes so far beyond just Karen Reed.
I agree. And Peter, you've been practicing for years. You've seen it all. So, but have you ever seen CPCS take a position this strong regarding law enforcement credibility issues?
Yeah, and it's so sad because what it does is the public, as you were saying earlier, and I agree, I admire law enforcement so much. 99 and something % of these guys would, I hope if I'm ever in trouble, I hope to God there's a police officer or a state trooper nearby, because those guys would be the first to help me. And I really admire them. But why, you have some bad apples who then ruin the reputation of everyone. And it really denigrates respect for law enforcement everywhere. And we need to respect law enforcement because if they're not able to work and they're not able to get people cooperating with them or talking to them, it's going to endanger all of us. And that's why I don't think I'm being overly dramatic when I talk what an explosive, absolutely explosive issue this is.
Yeah, I agree. And clearly those text messages demonstrate bias and misconduct. And I'd like to talk to you about mandatory discovery. Under Rule 14, can you explain that for viewers? What is Rule 14? What does it mean?
Well, it's something like this. It's, I guess, generally speaking, though, remember the idea of, we always talk about this, a criminal defense attorney like myself has to be a zealous advocate for my client. A prosecutor isn't just a zealous advocate for the state. They have to be after justice and fairness. And if a prosecutor finds out any information that is helpful to the defense, they've got to disclose it. If they're investigating the case and suddenly realize they've charged the wrong person, they can't just keep going after the person. And so why we respect prosecutors so much is because they're not supposed to just be out to stick it to people who are charged, but they're really supposed to be out for justice. And they've got to disclose any information at all to the defense. So there's a kind of a level playing field, and it's fair, and the information is out there for everyone, and they can't keep it hidden. It's not like, we always talked about the old Perry Mason, moment where, in the past there'd be like, it was always trial by ambush, and they never gave suddenly the information would be found in the middle of the trial. They've got to really lay it out beforehand in fairness.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And talk about, I know in the letters they talked a lot about due process rights. So how would this possibly impact somebody's due process rights?
Well, yeah, if you're the subject, if you're simply an American citizen who is under some kind of investigation, there's got to be fairness every inch of the way, that the investigation has to be on the up and up. There can't be misconduct. There can't be hidden evidence or whatever. Then it gets turned over to the prosecutor. And that's when you have a right to challenge their evidence and be heard and bring your own witnesses and all that. And that's kind of the whole idea about due process. It's not like some other, totalitarian police states where they simply grab you, they don't even mention the charges, and you're off to jail, and you say, but what did I do? And there's got to be kind of a fairness every step of the way. You have to be able to challenge it, be aware of all the information against you, and challenge it. And when you have some bad apples who are in law enforcement, then information is either being made up or not being investigated properly, then our whole American system falls apart. And trials are the cornerstone of our democracy. And if you had police officers not doing a good investigation job, then your due process would be dramatically hurt.
Oh, I agree. Isn't it this nice, Peter, that you can actually answer a question without being cut off? Like on Court TV last year.
I love this. This is a that I have the luxury that you're not interrupting me, and we do have some time. I mean, sometimes we do a story where we have lots and lots of guests at the same time, and we got a bunch of us who are trying to all talk within like a 12-minute period, and everybody's jumping in and talking over each other. I really it almost dumbs down the conversation, and this is on a lot more higher, more intelligent level, the way you run your show here.
Yeah, well, I remember last year when we were in Dedham, right, live, like the four of us, it was, I don't know, usually a panel of four, and Vinny's sitting in the middle. And I remember when I first started doing it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to just jump in and cut somebody off, because otherwise they would go and go and go. Remember that?
Yeah, and I think I was even talking to you at the time. I was kind of complaining. I said, I'm jumping in and interrupt, and all that. And I feel almost this isn't my personality. I don't like to jump in and interrupt and argue back and forth and then kind of raise my voice a little bit so that I can be heard. And yet that forum, that's what they were looking for. And that's what we had to do.
Yeah, and actually, I heard from Vinnie Paladin said that those shows in Dedham that we were on with the panels, they had the highest ratings of the whole year. So,
yeah, I heard that, and I had people asking me to be on, other shows who just say, "Oh, I love the way you were going back and forth with it." So I guess it sells.
It does sell. It does sell.
People like that.
Yeah. So another legal question I'm going to ask you is, in the letter, Attorney Benedetti from CPCS, the chief counsel, relies heavily on the Graham decision from the Supreme Judicial Court. Why is that case so important here? I don't mean to put you on the spot. Like, what's this case? I'm like a judge. What's this case?
I did not review that case beforehand. Okay. I kind of looked over, and I looked over, what his letter that he wrote, and yet I didn't go back and look over that case.
Oh, that's no problem. I believe it suggests that prosecutors have an affirmative duty to investigate when misconduct comes to light. I believe that's what the Graham decision says.
Yeah,
so, and that makes sense.
Cases that say that they do have to not only disclose it, but they also have to look into it. Again, there can't be any. And we have had some cases where we found out in the past that it's horrible. Some of those wrongful convictions, and then we, that around the country that we hear about cases where people got convicted or put in the, the death penalty or whatever, and that from 25 years ago, and it turned out that the police or the prosecutor was sitting on evidence where they really knew the person wasn't guilty, and then you wonder that talk about a monstrous act. The idea that if a prosecutor is putting people they know innocent people into prison, not only do you destroy that person's life, but also the guilty person gets away free.
That's true too.
So it's kind of in both ways. It doesn't really help, and for the victim's family, that doesn't do them any favors, I don't think.
I don't think so. Can you imagine living with that guilt that you put somebody away that was innocent? I think the prosecutor who put somebody away knowing that they did it, and I think that person should be held criminally liable.
Well, what is the difference between that and kidnapping somebody or that's what I say. If you kidnap somebody and drag them away and lock them up in a room somewhere, sure, you'd be prosecuted and get a life sentence or whatever. But if a police officer or a prosecutor were to know somebody was innocent and have them lose their liberty and sit in the cell for 25 years, how is that different than kidnapping? That prosecutor should get a life sentence,
Exactly. And I remember somebody who just in the Whitey Bulger saga of cases, that one guy just got out. Remember, he was in jail for a long time. His name is escaping me, but he was wrongfully convicted. He got all sorts of money from the state. And I just can't imagine. But I think what the reasoning was, well, he was a bad guy anyway, which doesn't make it right.
Yes, I've heard that explanation, and you're right. You want to go after, and that's why sometimes that's why you're not allowed to, when somebody's accused of a crime during the trial of that crime, you're not allowed to mention their whole past history, because you're not allowed to use that against them. Like, well, they did bad stuff in the past. They must have done this too. You have to look at each case individually, and
right.
It must be. I just, that would be everybody's worst nightmare, to be convicted of like a murder, and you're sitting there for decades. And of course, when you start saying, "But I'm innocent," everybody goes, "Yeah, right."
Yeah.
Everybody says that. Yeah, you and everybody, you're all innocent, right? And so, and nobody's listening to you at all. And it's, what a horrible thing. And that's why we want to do anything we can to prevent that. And that is why prosecutors and police officers are under the gun here to disclose anything, to any wrongdoing, to investigate it, to let the other side know. That's why that is so very, very important.
Yeah. So, back to the whole cases, the public defender CPCS wants to lists of every open and closed case involving Proctor and Goode. So do you think that's going to happen?
Probably, because, and we in Massachusetts know this, that we had a similar thing happen a few years ago when the crime lab disgrace.
Dugan.
A bad apple who was actually working in the crime lab where they were testing drugs and other things, and was fabricating evidence. And suddenly everybody kind of said the same thing. It was the biggest scandal in Massachusetts criminal history, probably ever up until that time, where, because people were saying, okay, there's tens of thousands of cases going through that crime lab. There's people who could be sitting in jail or were deported, put in jail and then deported from there because of something that may have been absolutely fabricated. And they were trying to, and everybody, the public defenders and all the criminal defense attorneys saying anything that went through that lab, we want to be able to look at it. We want it. And it took, again, tens of millions of dollars and man hours. And they had, prosecutors were setting up, individual units to look at some of these cases that were part of that drug lab scandal. And this is very similar, where it really is becomes, it's almost like mushrooms that it's in geometric progression. We just don't know where it ends. And that's why I think there really is an obligation to open up and to defense counsel from cases from years and years back. I mean, someone like Canton police officer Sean Goode, who was, I understand, was a police officer for 20 years. Does that mean we have to go through 20 years of investigations that he did? How many thousands of cases would that be? But I think there really is an obligation to do that, because it is so tainted, and it just looks, it just cries out for justice.
Right. For example, let's say you're sitting in jail and somebody like Proctor or Goode, or somebody associated with them, which we may find out more, you're sitting in jail and you're like, wait a minute, those guys investigated my case. I would call my defense attorney right away and say, I want you to look into this again. And also, what about somebody, let's go 20 years ago, somebody who now has a criminal record as a result of one of these investigators? I don't want a criminal record. It's hard enough to get a job these days.
Well,
So
yeah,
they're
and
going to
think
be
about
calling their defense attorney. You're going to be really busy.
well, think about the effect that may have had on somebody's life. It may have ruined their career, and
Hmm.
so for the last
Hmm.
20 years, they haven't made the income that they once. Maybe they were a professional and they couldn't get a job. They couldn't get a job in that field
Yeah.
anymore, so they had to do menial work, um, and they may have lost out on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of income they could have got over the last few years. And we also worry about some of the people who, because they got a criminal record, then got deported. And
Mm.
where are they now? They're scattered somewhere in the world, and their entire life was upended, or perhaps when they went to jail, they had children, and there was nobody to take care of them, so the children went into foster care. It is just nightmarish what a false conviction can do to a family, to the children, and to marriages, and to income, and people lose their houses because they have a conviction. I could go on and on, but
Yeah. Think about
it's
it.
really hard to just you can't minimize it, and I don't even think people like that can ever be made whole again. And
Right.
there's just too much damage over the decades.
Right. And you can look at the flip side of everything, right? So somebody who really did commit the crime, and it could be a heinous crime, it could be a sex offense. Let's say they're really guilty. Well, they might get off as a result. So you could look
Right,
at it
and
that way too.
that was the allegation kind of put out by Karen Reed's team, that
Hmm.
you didn't do any investigation. As I said, they didn't even look in the house where the body was found outside of, and again and again, they didn't interview people right at the beginning who might be witnesses who were around there. We had everybody had time. Every single person in the house at that party, by the time we got around to asking for their cell phones, every cell phone had been wiped clean or thrown out. And so this is one thing that bothered me about the case, because people who thought Karen Reed was guilty, they would say, well, if she's not guilty, how come we haven't got any evidence on anybody else? And how come, obviously somebody else, if they did it, we would be finding it. And no, that was never investigated. And then after a while, as months and months go by, evidence can be lost. It can be covered up. If you were going to look in that house, and if there was any DNA or blood or fingerprints or damage or broken chairs in there or something like that, that's all wiped clean. And by
Yeah,
the
you're
time
right.
they look into that, so that's why, if that is the argument, that, well, on the Karen Reed case, you didn't come up with anybody else yet. Nobody was investigated. Nobody else was looked into. They kind of, from the first minutes, they just kind of focused on her, and the investigation was not done properly. And I sort of have all along said that's the bigger problem for me almost than
Hmm.
the poor taste jokes and the nasty, sexist comments and all that. It's just that they, if they were doing a great job and made horrible, poor taste, obnoxious jokes and despicable things that they said, at least if they had actually done an investigation, that might have been a slightly saving grace to it all.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You do have a point there. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the further fallout. We've got the 4 lawsuits, Karen Reed civil suits, right? 4. So talk about the legal maneuvering. Number 1, we have the wrongful death lawsuit filed by the O'Keefe family. They allege that Karen Reed drove drunk, struck John O'Keefe with her SUV, and left him to die in the snow. And this is, in fact, just the case we just saw with Michael Proctor. He was scheduled to be deposed on Monday, yet he got a continuance for some, we're guessing, unknown medical conditions. We've got that one. And then number 2, and then we'll go back through and talk about them a little. Number 2, Karen Reed is also suing 5 witnesses in federal court. So you have the House defendants, Brian and Nicole Albert, Jennifer and Matt McCabe, ATF agent Brian Higgins, and then Yuri Buchanan. And Brian Tully, Michael Proctor are also in that one. She's alleging a coordinated effort to frame her. So that's a big one. Then number 3, you have Jennifer McCabe, Brian and Nicole Albert, Colin Albert, Brian Higgins. They are suing Karen Reed and Aiden Kearney, Turtle Boy, for defamation, saying they were falsely implicated in O'Keefe's death. So that's an interesting one. And then number 4, we have the one we just talked about. Karen Reed is suing the state police in the town of Canton in Bristol County for negligence, civil conspiracy, and wrongful prosecution. That was just filed last week, and that's when all the text messages came out. So what do you think? Let's talk about the wrongful death suit quickly. What do you think about that one? Do you think there's any merit in it?
No, I still think that they don't have enough evidence against her. Now, just to explain to the audience again, you can have a criminal case, and when that's over, even if the defendant is found not guilty, you can still sue them, and there's a lesser standard. And we saw that with, always hate to bring OJ up, but we always have to do that. He got found not guilty in the criminal trial, but he was found responsible in the civil lawsuit. There was the actor, the star of Beretta was Robert Blake. Same thing. He was accused of killing his wife. He got found not guilty, but they won the civil suit. And we always talk about it's a lesser standard. If civil suit, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's preponderance of the evidence. And I always say it's as if you were a scale. And in a civil suit, if 51% of your gut goes for the person's responsible, and 49 says not so sure, you go with the 51%. But criminal, it's a lot higher. Beyond a reasonable doubt is a lot higher. So it is easier to prove a civil case than it is a criminal case. However, I'm still not sure that they really have the evidence against her and were nailed. I just think there's too much. I think the investigation was so botched. That's another thing. If Proctor done everything right and they, got evidence against her, it would be, he did a disservice to the prosecution. If she was genuinely guilty, he would have done a disservice by not doing a good investigation. So I'm just not, I think that's going to be, well, you're probably in the same boat as me. We've given up long ago trying to guess what a jury will do. I've been wrong so many times, but I would say that that's not the strongest of civil cases against her on the wrongful death.
Yeah, and it was also filed down in Plymouth, which, you want to get as far away, you got to get far from Dedham as you can. So I think that may make a difference. It depends on the jury, and it also depends on how they present the evidence with the science and the data and the car. And still, though, Michael Proctor's text messages and all that will come in, so a jury may not want to award anything. So it depends. So we'll look that one. I think you're right. It can go either way.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet the farm on it. Like I say, I'm leaning towards saying it's not the strongest wrongful death case, but I also wouldn't rule out they could be successful too. You never know.
Yeah. So number 2 is Karen suing 5 witnesses in federal court. So you got the House defendants for alleging a coordinated effort to frame her. I don't think they're going to have enough evidence for that as well.
No, we never were able to put it together. And it may be true, but I don't think we would have heard it all. And maybe they'll uncover new evidence. But during this last 4.5 years, I haven't found, other than, boy, it looks really fishy and it doesn't pass the smell test. And my hunch is it was a coordinated thing. The evidence just, they were never able to get the evidence together, particularly because there wasn't any kind of good investigation done at all. And but yeah, I think that could be, unless I learn of some new evidence, I don't think that's the strongest case that she would have there.
Right. You'd have to have the dog. Remember the whole dog bite thing?
Right. And that was unbelievably fishy that they said that it looked like he had been bitten by the dog, which would be proof that that he was assaulted in the dog. And it was kind of unbelievable that they had a dog for this. I'm a dog lover. I own I own some.
I heard the dog barking in the background.
They ruin every video I have, but
I love that. I love it. Let's say hi to, what's his name?
I'm sorry. I've got like the door, like I got chairs against my door so they don't break through. But
that's okay. If they did, actually, we'd get more views.
But as a dog lover, I can't believe that the family there in that house had a dog for 7 years, and all of a sudden this death happens, and suddenly they rehome the dog, and it's somewhere else. We don't know where it is, and it's kind of when somebody else is taking care of it. And that was very, very strange.
Yeah, A lot of jurors thought so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anybody who has a dog, the idea that you'd have a dog for 7 years and just, you'd have to, pry me away with a crowbar from my dog. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine rehoming any pet, to be honest. So, I grew up with dogs. I have 3 cats now, so I can't imagine. Well, actually, I could get rid of one of them. I'm just kidding. For scratching my furniture. But number 3, the third case, Jen McCabe, Brian and Nicole Albert, Colin and Albert and Brian Higgins are suing Karen Reed and Aidan Kearney for defamation. Now, that might have some standing.
You and I may finally disagree on something. I don't think defamation again is basically an intentional lie or just total, reckless disregard.
Disregard.
And so I'm not sure that they can. And defamation. That's why defamation lawsuits are notoriously difficult to prove. It's very rare. They're successful once in a while, but it's pretty rare. And they would have to show basically that Karen Reed or her defense team knew that they weren't responsible for it and for any wrongdoing, and they intentionally lied about it, or they were incredibly reckless about it. And the fact that she and her defense counsel kind of, raised it enough times, like the possibility, even though they didn't have any definite proof, I'm not quite sure they get over that, though, because again, you're not going to be able to show that she knew that they were, innocent, did no wrongdoing, and this was an intentional lie on her part. And so then you could say, well, that was kind of just an absolute reckless disregard for the truth. I don't know. There were enough clues where she couldn't prove it, but where you couldn't say it was absolutely, totally reckless. The idea was just crazy.
Yeah. What about Aidan Kearney, Turtle Boy, though? He went off. Like some of the stuff he said. Defamation.
Yeah, he has a kind of a different approach than what I would. I would use, and he's kind of, but it's kind of a mixed bag because he's one of the people who really, one of the initial defenders of Karen Reed, who really alerted the public about not everything is done on the up and up in this case. And without him, I don't know. There's a lot of people who get falsely accused of things or accused of crimes, and it's just nobody really hears about it. It's a private thing in a courtroom, and people get convicted. And the idea that she had, 200,000 supporters out there outside the courthouse, at a time, could be. There's an argument that says that it's because Turtle Boy was kind of got the ball rolling, pointed out a lot of wrongdoing and misconduct in the case, and that's what that's really what got the case going. And then you can say, well, if you want to scrutinize every statement that he made, whether you agree or don't, or think this went a little too far, I guess it's kind of a mixed bag. But he's probably as responsible for anybody as bringing this whole injustice to light.
Yeah, that you have a point. I don't know if we'd be seeing all these texts that we saw this past week if it wasn't for him starting the whole thing. You're right about that.
Right, and also it's like, how often do you have? Normally, when there's people surrounding a courthouse and they're angry, it's usually everybody hates the defendant. Normally, if you're accused of killing somebody, you have no friends and everybody hates you. And this was the rarest of cases. I've been observing, and you have too, probably, I've been observing these cases for decades in Massachusetts, and I have never seen anything that picked up the public's imagination or got the public as involved, and basically on the side of the person who's accused. And when people say, well, there's a debate, Karen Reed, there's people who think she's guilty, there's people who think she's not guilty. It was never, in my humble opinion, it was never 50-50. It was like 85% of the public thought she was being railroaded. And even when you'd have these public demonstrations, it bothered me a few times watching the media where they'd say, well, there's 2 different groups out there, pro Karen Reed and against, and the pro Karen Reed would be 100,000, and then there may be 15 who are against Karen Reed, and yet they were kind of given equal time on the air, as if but it really the support for her I've never seen, on a somebody accused of a homicide who had the overwhelming support of the public like that. That everybody just thought there was something not quite right about the prosecution of an investigation there.
Yeah. No, you make a point there too. So defamation, you say no, I say possibly. Number 4, Karen Reed suing the state police in the town of Canton in Bristol County for negligence, civil conspiracy, wrongful prosecution. I think that might, well, these things may get settled, but I think that might be the strongest one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of accepted that the investigation and the prosecution were not on the up and up here. That it wasn't, even if you thought, and I've had people say, even people think, oh, she's guilty, or maybe I've had people say to me, well, I don't think she might have backed up accidentally, and so I think she might have wound up killing him, but I don't think she intended it. But even those people who say that usually say that there's just something horribly wrong with the way that the investigation was done here. It was just botched every step of the way, and it was absolutely prejudicial against her. And so I think that there might be merit that she was not given due process, and there was not a fairness in the whole process and procedure against her.
Yeah. And what about, so overall, let me ask you this. What do you think accountability looks like to you in the future? What can we learn from this? How would you like to see change here in Massachusetts and possibly across the country?
Well, here in Massachusetts, I think that this shouldn't just focus totally on if these 2 people are responsible, State Trooper Michael Proctor and Canton Police Officer Sean Goode. It shouldn't really just stop with them. I think that the question is, how do people not just get hired in a situation like that, but how are they able to go on for that many years? Because as the evidence seems to be coming out, this was not a secret. This was not, and this wasn't kind of a one-off, like, oh, they all jumped on Karen Reed and they were, these are excellent
right.
law enforcement officers, and they happened to go off the rails on this one case. They kind of lost their mind. But what we're seeing is a track record and a history of years and years and years of we're looking at these, text and whatever phone messages and all that. And how long were you even doing text messages, really? How many years?
Oh, that's a good point.
What went on before then? But the fact that we have this evidence that they seem to be, that really alludes to misconduct every step of the way. And I can't believe, and the fact that we know that, for example, State Trooper Michael Proctor was not only when the investigation was texting, but he was sharing text with friends who were not in the police force. He was sharing it with superiors. So there really has to be a systemic change made that would, they've got to be able to stay on top of this and catch this, because we really know Proctor had superiors who were aware of his statements, and it really they've got to set up a better procedure and system now to root out some of the bad apples who are part of these law enforcement agencies, because like I said, and you were saying earlier, there's such a tiny fraction. Every other law enforcement officer is risking their life for us. Most of them are just sterling characters who have our full admiration, and so you have a few bad apples who are going to kind of ruin the reputation for everybody, where people are no longer going to respect police or want to even cooperate with police. It's got to be rooted out, and that's why this is kind of a clarion call to root out and have better procedures for doing that rooting out.
Yeah, I like that, clarion call. That's a great way to put it.
And I don't know where off the top of my head,
love that word.
I came out with that. I've got to. I'm gonna go Google that also and see the where I picked up that phrase.
I've seen it in actual court cases. Clarion call. I think judges use it.
Yeah,
That's
it's
where I
almost
think
like
I've
an
seen it.
all. It's like an all-inclusive, all points bulletin. Like I'm calling out to all of you. Um, uh,
When
yeah,
we're on television next for court TV, we have to use that word when we're on the same panel. That would be great. I'm going to write it down so we use it. I like it a lot. So you as a criminal defense attorney, is this whole fallout going to change the way you practice and handle some of your cases?
well, we criminal defense attorneys are always skeptical anyway with the
Yeah.
investigations. And so this will be, I don't know that it's going to change the way I practice, but I'm so grateful and happy that that Karen Reed's team is bringing this out, because it's going to waken up a lot of people and perhaps make all of our jobs not just easier, but more fair, and the justice would prevail. If the word is out that, hey, let's keep an eye, people who, in charge of law enforcement agencies, state police, local police departments, if they kind of have their eyes open and really want to catch people who either have misconduct or saying the wrong kinds of disgraceful things, if they're on alert, it's going to help all of us and it's going to help the system. The cases are simply going to be more fair. So as a defense counsel, I'm going to always be skeptical whenever anybody accuses another person, because we've seen enough cases where people do get falsely accused, and so this is going to be helpful.
Well, thank you very much. You were very informative, Peter. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I'd love to have you back on. You're
Oh, I'm going to be a
fabulous.
regular. I'm going to be like every day. I'm going to be
Yeah.
knocking on your door now. This is such a fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's very just enlightening, and informative the way that you run things, and that we also do have the luxury of a little bit of time. It's not like
Yes.
every so often I'll do an interview and it'll be like a 8 or 12-second soundbite that I'll get on the air, and this that we can really flesh out in depth.
Yeah.
Is and the kind of depth that your show has is
Thank you.
Helpful for the public.
And I think, you're welcome. And I think the comments that I'm getting is people do like to learn more about the law and learn more about these cases instead of just the sound bites that they're getting from the media. So I have gotten feedback, and all of you out there, please keep the comments going and send me your information. I mean, not your, actual information, but information on what you'd like me to cover and who you'd like me to have on as guests. There's different cases that I might not be aware of. Some of you are listening from, England and all over the world. So, let me know in the comments. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Margaret McLean Show. And I really appreciate you being on tonight, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I say good night to everyone, and hold on, Peter, and